Use that option. Hello again. Welcome to episode 4 of the Collecting the Precious podcast. Jim and I are back, and this time we have a very, very, very special guest, someone that I've been very lucky to get to know over the last several years, 10 years or so, I think at this point, Mr. Daniel Falconer of Weta Workshop. Daniel, would you please tell the world exactly who and what you are at Weta Workshop?
Hey folks, how are you all? So my name's Daniel. I've been at Weta Workshop for like 25 years. I was there back in the Lord of the Rings days. I can do that Elrond line, right? I was there, Gandalf, 3,000 years ago, however long it feels now. So I was there back then, part of the design team on the Lord of the Rings, which was a tremendous honor for me as a very young designer at the time, very inexperienced, but massive Tolkien fan. So it was a dream come true. 25 plus years on, I'm still with Weta Workshop. I'm part-time there now, but my part-time role there is as art director of the Middle-earth collectibles line. That's great fun because it means I get to stay in Middle-earth even after all these years. And I'm a collector as well, so it scratches a couple of different itches in my personality. So yeah, it's good. It's good times. So I want to talk to you guys because you are the people that we seek to connect with. The collectibles are essentially a way for us as fans of these films, and this world to continue to connect with it and to, I guess, stay in that world and create things and reach out to the community that are also equally passionate about it, which is you guys. And, Josh, gosh, we've known each other, I don't know how many years now, but
at least 10, because I've been going to Comic-Con since, 05 was my first one. Obviously, the only ones I've missed have been the last two because of COVID. So, wow. And yours was right around. How long you been going to Comic-Con?
I think 2001. I don't go every year, but I think 2001 was maybe the first year I went.
Okay.
So so I think I've been like maybe it must be half a dozen times. So yeah great fun. But it's you just. When you bond over stuff that you all are so passionate about together, you form really, really great friendships over this stuff, and then they're sustained over the years. So it's awesome. So it's really nice to see you. I'm sorry we didn't get to see you in person this year, but it's nice to connect this way. And Jim, it's very nice to meet you. I'm very familiar with you because I tune into a lot of Torn's shows, and so I've seen you. So I feel like I know you already as well.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Well, we've been very lucky that with here at Torn to have obviously people who want to collect stuff and everything, and it's been nice to have Jim, who, as you can see, has you can see some of his stuff. He's actually got a pretty healthy collection on the other side of the camera. And so when we started talking about doing this idea, Justin had kind of been pushing me for a while to do it, and Jim was like, hey, I'll do it with you, because it's one of those to do a review by yourself or to talk at Comic-Con one-on-one when it's just you and there's no cameras is a little different scenario. But so, it's nice to have Jim because he collects, he's passionate about Middle-earth and collecting and stuff. So it's nice to have him on here and, be able to do this and talk about collectibles, because it is something that obviously, like you and I have gotten to talk about a lot over the years. And it's just a different way to be passionate about Middle-earth and the world that particular universe that Tolkien created. It's a way to just be very passionate about it in a different form, other than always watching the movies or always reading the books. So to me, collecting is about, I guess, bringing your passion into your home and expressing it, and then being surrounded by it and defining your space by it. And when people come in, they're like, oh, okay. And they got to get a little snapshot of who you are, I guess, by the treasures that you've surrounded yourself by. Oh, absolutely.
It sparks conversation. And also, I see things in the room and I'm like, oh, I love that, it reminds me of what I love about it. And it gets me thinking about it. And, these imaginary worlds, I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, also Star Wars fan, Star Trek fan, all that kind of stuff. I love thinking about them all the time because it gives me a different perspective on our world. And so sometimes for me, reflecting on the Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or whatever, sometimes shifts my perspective on things I'm going through in my daily life. It's like, well, there are lessons in these worlds. They may be imaginary, but they're about people. and they have real stories that resonate with us. And so sometimes they give me moments where I'm like, oh, actually, you know, I could be probably a little bit more Jedi about that particular moment, or I can channel something Gandalf said. You know what I mean? And so I love being surrounded by that. That's what it means to me as a collector.
Daniel, you've already thrown out one comment, that you were a Lord of the Rings fan prior to that 2001 entry into Weta, it sounded like.
Yes.
So I'm curious how that came to be, and were you collecting things even before you started making these things through Weta?
Yes, actually, that's a great question. So yeah, I mean, I was introduced to the Lord of the Rings. We read The Hobbit at school when I was about 9 or 10 years old, but also even before then, I remember when I was about the same age. it's so much a part of so many of us of our childhoods, right? But my mother also gave me her copy of The Lord of the Rings when I was about that age and said, if you like The Hobbit, you need to read this next. And it was like falling apart, you know. It was so well loved and so well read.
Do you remember the cover?
It was one of those I wish I could find it again. It was it's probably since fallen apart, but it was one of those beautiful old yellow covers with the really tall spindly trees on the side, and the road leading off to Barad-dûr in the distance. Maybe it's on the spine, I can't remember now. But yeah, I can't remember the publishing date on that particular copy. But yeah, I devoured it. And it was also about, I was about 4 or 5. When did the Bakshi film come out? Was that 79 or 80, something around there?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah, so I remember being old enough to see the posters everywhere, but not old enough to go and see it, and being just captivated by it. I remember just seeing, you know, those images of Gandalf sort of looming over and Gollum in a corner and under a tree and stuff, and just being so excited about it. And so I was thinking about that long before I even knew what it was. But it was the sort of visuals were so strong, they really resonated with me.
Yeah, 78.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, I was too young, but I do remember it's nonetheless made an impression on me. And I finally saw that later, many years later. But where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so that was my introduction to that world, and then I would read the books all the time, think about it all the time. I was so into it that when I was about 12 years old, I used to pretend I was Gollum all the time and run around. And some of my longtime friends from back then still call me Smeagol, so which is kind of crazy. But thankfully, I grew out of that. Yeah, so found myself at Weta in 1996, and I think the first work we started on Lord of the Rings was in 1997. So I'd already just got there in time, and then this project came along, which originally was The Hobbit. You guys are probably already aware, but when we very first started on it, it was The Hobbit, and then I think we'd only done a week's worth of work on it. I hadn't even put pencil to paper yet because I was on a different project at the time, but it got taken off, and they said, "Oh, you know what? Actually, we don't. The rights are too complex on The Hobbit." So they're because the original plan was to do The Hobbit. If that goes well, do 2 Lord of the Rings films. But when it didn't quite work out, the rights were a little complex on The Hobbit for the distribution rights. Miramax, it was at the time, said to us, actually, okay, well, we'll just go straight into Lord of the Rings. And I mean, I was excited about both prospects, but to me, the Lord of the Rings is just so much more expansive and huge that was like, oh, wow, this could really be something special. And then the pressure became, oh my God, knowing what this should be.
Yeah.
Nervousness became, well, what if it's not, you know? And so it then became about, oh my goodness, how do we live up to this extraordinary responsibility of making a live action adaptation of these incredibly precious and amazing books? Yeah, so that was something very much that I and my colleagues, many of whom had similar stories growing up reading these books and loving them. We all felt that very, very keenly. So in our minds, we were responsible to ourselves in a sense that we had ideas in our minds of what these books should be on the screen, and then we were also responsible to the director because he had a vision that he wanted us to represent. And then I always felt very keenly that we were responsible to the many people out there who had never read the Lord of the Rings yet, who would discover these films for the first time, see them, and then go and read the books, right? And then so in that instance, you know, if you've read the books first, you come in with a preconception of this world and you've experienced it on your own terms through the books first. But when you go in to see the films first and then you read the books, your experience of reading the books will definitely be colored in some way by what you've seen on the screen. So if we completely screw it up, then we deny you the opportunity to experience that for the first time fresh. You know what I mean? So So that I felt very keenly that we had to, as much as any of us could do, we only influence one small little aspect of what we're working on. You know, it was the desire to try and get it as right as possible, and where the details might diverge, you know, in specific details, hopefully still the essence, the spirit of it is hopefully the same. So
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Josh. I was just going to say that reflection of detail and the fact that artistically it seemed like you all were choosing to shoot history more than fantasy, and how that reflected itself in all the various expressions of cultures and of locations and of the undercurrent of history, which is so prevalent because we grew up reading the books, that, you know, even if your interpretation was not the same, your attention to the details were such that it was an invitation into a really rich creative world, which then, you know, and that has to characterize every collectible that you're still making has to reflect that kind of attention to it. So,
well,
thank you.
I mean, that's that's interesting to hear you, because I don't think I've ever heard you talk about it from that point of view before. But for me, I didn't read the books until I had seen the films. I decided after seeing Two Towers, in between Two Towers, Return of the King, to read the books. And so it's interesting that you and everybody were thinking about it from, you know, in some ways from that point of view as well, because it did bring it. I mean, I'm a perfect example of what you were aiming for. It. I saw the trailer, or one of the trailers, and I was like just mesmerized by it. My mom had said, "Oh, I read Fellowship of the Ring in high school." And I'm like, "Well, then let's go see that in December. Let's go, you know." And so it started, you know, from that. And so I think that's interesting that was one of the areas that how you guys were preparing for the films, because it did. I mean, because of that approach, and because of how the films came out, you know, ultimately we're having this conversation now, and I have a collection, you know, that I do because of it. So that's really cool. I had never heard you talk about it in that manner. So
I think, I mean, I wasn't alone too, in a sense that much of our design department at Weta Workshop was comprised of people with similar experiences and similar love for that source material. And so I still just pinch myself at the tremendous luxury we had. We had a very long pre-production time, which is not usual on films. And thank goodness we did, because that's how you get the richness and the depth and the ability to play and explore. It would have been very different if we had to rush straight through it in just a few months. But, you know, the honor and pleasure of actually spending time in that room with a bunch of my colleagues, just sitting around, just talking out about the Lord of the Rings the whole time, and playing the, oh, what if game, oh, what if we did this, what if we did that, you know, and trying to color in, you know, you're designing a suit of armor or a costume for a character and weapons for them and props and that kind of stuff, and trying to figure out, okay, if the Tolkien's text doesn't tell you exactly what it should be, then where can we find that information? What's inferred by the other things that he said, or by the history that he's drawing from, or the mythology that he's drawing from as he was inspired by? That was so much fun. I still feel so lucky to be part of that process. So it was, that's the kind of job description that you write for yourself when you're 10 and you get to do later on. So yeah, so that was fantastic. And that realism thing, I think that really comes down to Peter Jackson having the foresight to say, you know what, that's the approach we need to take on this, is we want to make it, if we hit the audiences over the head with too much fantasy, I think we switch them off. He said, so let's ground it in a reality that we can recognize, that feels familiar, and then we introduce the more fantastical elements slowly and carefully, and then they mean more when you actually encounter them. You know, when Gandalf first does something truly magical, you're like, whoa, this is amazing. You know, those fireworks are incredible. Yeah. So yeah, he was very clever. And I think the other true genius, one of the other things that he did with that I think was very, very clever, was bringing John Howell and Alan Lee on board, because they brought with them that amazing pedigree and also that trust, I think, because we had all been reading the books and looking at the calendars that those gentlemen had been illustrating for years. And so the Middle-earth that we were imagining in our heads kind of sprang from those images that they had already laid the seeds of. And so really we were just fleshing that out and building the aesthetic that they had already established into a bigger world, coloring in beyond what they'd already given us, I guess. So I think that made the world more accessible to audiences who otherwise maybe would have been, you know, been starting from zero, but we weren't starting from zero. We already had a run up, which was great. And not to mention, of course, those two gentlemen are just incredible artists and lovely, lovely people. And they brought with them all their experience and their knowledge. I mean, John was amazing because when he first showed up, I remember him very, very politely looking at the work that I and my colleagues had been doing. And, you know, as Dungeons and Dragons players in high school, you know, our aesthetic was informed by that. And so that's a different aesthetic to the Lord of the Rings that ultimately we ended up making. And so John was saying, well, these designs, they look very young. And what he was politely saying was, actually, you guys need to do a bit of research and do your history research and actually look at how armor and weapons work, why they work the way they do, and let the function of them inform your designs rather than just sticking spikes on everything because it's cool. You know what I mean?
Oh, neat. Yeah, were there some of those artistic or design decisions must have been pretty straightforward. So, you know, the doors of Moria were already illustrated in the book, so not a lot of debate over that. Were there some that were particularly easy, or what were the ones that really stimulated debate, where you had really different options and landed on one versus another?
I think in the beginning, the very first things we were designing were sometimes some of the hardest, because at that point we didn't have the aesthetic of the world completely nailed down yet. We were still figuring out what was too far, what was beyond the bounds, and where exactly everything resided. So the first things we started, Peter said, I want you to design a cave troll, and I want you to design Elven and Uruk-hai armor, and that'll be where we start, and that'll help create, I guess, the boundaries for everything else. And that was tough. So on those were probably the things that we did the most work on for many, many weeks, just trying to figure out where the aesthetic lay. You know, do the elves have wooden armor? Do they have, you know, what's the shapes in them? Are they intricate and woven like Celtic knotwork, or are they more like leaf forms, or are they Grecian, or are they, you know, all that kind of stuff? And the troll, you know, how crazy is a troll looking? You know, is it a so those things I think were the hardest to nail down. Once we had some successes there, and Peter was like, "Yeah, that's it. I like that one." Then you could build out from that and go, okay, if that lives in the world, what else lives in the same world with that creature or that race and feels harmonious with it, or completely juxtaposes against it? Because there are certainly cases where you wanted something to feel completely otherworldly. The Balrog being one, you want that to feel like it comes from a more ancient world, and so it's got that more elemental feel. And then the Ents, you know, for example, or another one where you've got something that it should be surprising to the audience. Hopefully not so surprising that they're jarred out of the movie, which so I was quite involved with the Ents, and I love them. They're some of my favorite characters and my favorite things to draw even now. But it was always a challenge. Oh my goodness, are we going too Muppety? Are we going too weird with these guys, or are they okay? And thankfully, I think it landed okay, but I was worried for a wee while there.
Yeah. How fun. So just one sidebar, because this is a debate. I don't do Comic-Con as much as I do Dragon Con, and we have had panels that were debating controversy among fans. And awesome. One of those weird questions was, do elves have pointed ears?
Right.
Were the elves' ears always pointed, or did you consider other options?
We certainly did. We talked about that a lot in the beginning, because that's sort of become a fantasy trope, right? But there's nowhere in the books that it ever mentions elves or hobbits or anybody having pointed ears. That was something that ultimately Peter said we needed to have a shorthand, a visual shorthand that would distinguish the elves from humans. And that was the logical one to use, because it had become such a kind of a pop culture convention, I suppose, amongst elves. So it was
elves and Vulcans. So
yes, there you go. It was certainly something that was discussed, but that was a decision made fairly early on that Peter said, no, I really would like them to have pointed ears. The hobbits we gave them big rounded ears, and that was partially also to increase the size of their heads visually, so that they didn't look, you know, microcephalic once you shrunk the actors down. But those were big round ears for a long time, and it was actually quite relatively late in the process, as I remember, that Peter was like, well, you know, actually, I wouldn't mind actually putting a little point on the hobbit ears as well, you know, so that ended up happening, which is why Gollum does not have pointed hobbit ears. Not nearly as pointed as the other characters anyway. I think the ideas are more round. I think, gosh, they are slightly pointed in the final version, but for a long time they weren't. The big round ears, yeah.
I'm a proud owner of a Weta set of hobbit ears. So
cool. Excellent.
Signed by Sean Astin. So yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned Vulcan ears too, because there's been a few conventions I've been at where we've had Star Trek cosplayers stop by the booth and buy the elven ears and We had a lovely Warren Dion Smith who would come to conventions and glue ears on for people. You know, he's a makeup artist.
Sure.
And so yeah, a number of Star Trek cosplayers came in and had elven ears put on, and yep, they were Vulcans. That worked.
It works.
So obviously, you know, you've been with Weta for a long time, and obviously, you know, done a lot of collectibles over the years, working with Weta and doing that aspect of it. One of the questions that we got, and I can't remember who sent the question. I wish I wrote that down. The question is, what do you think the best collectible that Weta has produced is, and is it different from your personal favorite?
Ooh. Oh man, it's so hard to say what the best one the company's ever produced is.
Who's your favorite baby? Yeah.
I'm glad you're having a hard time because I mean, while you're thinking, I'll rattle off for a second. For me personally, it's hard to pick. It really is in some ways hard to pick one because, you know, I get teased about being somebody who kind of likes everything, and it's not so much because I like everything, but when you buy something like these, and you know, they're collectibles are not cheap. I don't care who you're buying them from. I don't care if you're buying from Weta. I don't care if you're buying from Sideshow. I don't care if you're buying from Prime One, Gentle Giant, Dark Horse. Doesn't matter. Collectibles are not cheap. They're you know, an extra item. It's like going and buying a really super nice television. It's going to cost you some money. If I'm spending that kind of money, I'm going to buy something I like. So you do a lot of, well, I like this piece. Well, I like this piece because, you know, it was something I wanted to buy. So I'm glad to see you're having a hard time thinking about this because it really is hard to pick. When you build a collection of this stuff, it's hard to say for sure this piece is your favorite piece. Now, I do have a favorite piece in my collection, but it is hard to pick one and stick with it.
Can I ask you what that favorite piece is? I'd love to know what
the original Balrog from the Sideshow.
Yeah, it's so good, isn't it? That was Ben Wooden sculpted that, who again was one of our designers on the films and was involved in designing the Balrog. And I just think he nailed it. And I think we've been chasing Balrogs. We've been chasing that Balrog ever since, because you never want to do the exact same thing again. But it worked. It was so balanced. It's got a wonderful sort of spinning quality to it. It just works so well. I still think that's, you know, as much as we've done Balrogs, you know, for 20 years, and I agree that's still one of the best pieces. So well, yeah,
it's such a almost mythical nature to it in how it is on the collectibles market. I mean, 20 years later, this thing still sells for $2,000 easy.
Crazy. You know, we all joked when we made it, you're like, oh, we should all invest in buying these. And I don't think any of us did, because one, none of us really had the money at the time either. But also, I don't think any of us really, we said that stuff and we didn't fully believe it. Man, I wish we had.
Balrogs and Apple stock, you know, wish I'd bought.
So, okay, so I've kind of helped give you some time.
You have, thank you. And I was still feeling for more. You sent me that question like 3 weeks ago to say, hey, this is a question that people are going to, and I've been thinking about it ever since. I still don't have a good answer for you. I don't know if I can pick like an all-time favorite, or the best thing Weta's ever made. I mean, I absolutely love the Masters Collection 1/3 scale Golem.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about that before you got here. We were talking about the Master Collection stuff.
Oh, it's such a sublime piece. I just think that's absolutely beautiful. So I admire. I can keep looking at that all the time.
Was that because people called you Gollum when you were growing up? Is that?
You know, you might be onto something there. I hadn't thought about it in that context, but yeah, maybe. But no, I just think it's such a beautiful piece. It feels so good, and that scale you can really see details. And Jamie filled it with so many lovely little wee Easter eggs too. There's little bones in the ring and all this kind of stuff in there, fish in the water and I love the hair on it. So that's got to be definitely a favorite of mine. It's one of the more beautiful high-end pieces that we've made. I know that when we're going to get off this call, I'm going to think of, oh, there's this and there's that. So I don't know. That's definitely one of the best, I think. A personal favorite. This is so bad of me, but like I'm going to be really jerky and say there's one that we haven't released yet that I think might be my favorite. I'm being such a horrible tease, but I'm pretty.
Do we get any hints at all?
Yeah, it's a Two Towers anniversary piece. Oh my goodness, two of them now, actually. There's the Masters Collection piece we've got coming out this year, which is a Two Towers piece.
Okay.
There's another one. There's a premium piece as well that that I just. It's one of these things that years ago we would never have done, but it's something I've always wanted to do, and I can't quite believe we're doing it. So I wish I could show you. Hold on just a few more months.
We do too.
I'm not allowed, and I honestly, I actually asked before we had this podcast, I asked, can I tell the guys, can I tell them a couple of things they got coming up? And they're like, no. And I'm like, I said, you can hint, but you can't tell them exactly what's coming up because we're not ready to reveal that stuff yet. Well, so there's a couple of really, really cool things coming that you'll get a look at San Diego. One being the Masters Collection, which I think it's different to anything we've done before, but I think it's absolutely beautiful. Brigitte West and Gary Hunt and Sean Bolton all collaborated on this piece together, and I think they've done an absolutely beautiful job. It's a multi-character piece.
Okay, that was the one you were talking about on the Shadow and Flame board.
Yeah, it's not enormous. It's not bigger than anything we've done before or anything like that. It's just I just think they've done a really, really beautiful job of it. And when Richard Taylor comes in the room, and he's got such an eye, and he's a big collector as well. When he comes in the room and goes, "Oh wow, I love everything about this," then you know you've got something that.
Yeah, wow.
We were talking about, and I was telling Jim this, and it's not, we weren't like, keep it secret or anything, but I was telling him about your thread on the Flame, and that you had, you'd answered some questions, and you had talked about the Master Collection piece, and we were talking about, things that we wanted to see or we hope to see, and Jim is a big collector of Samwise Gamgee.
So here, I'll turn my. Yeah, there you go. Here's my Sam.
The camera, you can see some of the stuff.
One shelf, just Sam. So
yeah. So that when I tell people Jim's a big collector too, his collection is really nice. His collection is really nice. And so I told him, I said, here's what I think. And you obviously, I know you can't say anything. I don't want to put you in a spot to get in trouble or anything. But I told him, I said, I don't want to get your hopes up, Jim, but I think my gut says it's Frodo, Sam, and Gollum in the Dead Marshes. That's my gut on the.
What brings you to that? Like, explain the thought process of how you come to that.
Multiple characters, and I mean, obviously that's the starting point. And I'm start thinking about scenes in that film that involve multiple characters. You'd said some things that you didn't think you would do. You mentioned something like that in that question, and I think with that kind of a piece, it's not so much but you could I was thinking, and Jim and I were talking about this, you could have the dead Numenorians or the dead elves in the water in that sequence,
which got us to the Gollum piece.
Have little light through,
and all of the Easter eggs that were hidden under the pool in that gorgeous piece, which we.
And you could fit those three characters on a base that's the size of the Master Collection bases, and I'm looking down on my table, imagining, you don't see me doing this being weird, people. I'm here sitting here going, like this, like anybody can see me. Good Lord. But I think with that kind of a base, I think you could fit them on there in a way and have the different pools, and you could, there's the different little fires that are obviously lit,
Yeah.
It's not crazy. Obviously Treebeard was just a mind-blowing piece. There's a picture of me with my mouth open looking like a fool when I got unveiled. Someone had gotten a picture of me because I'm just like, holy. But I think that piece fits into how you were describing it, simply because of it involves something like having bodies in the water and the way that it's done and everything. So to me, that piece seems like it either could be a premium piece or like the Master Collection, because, and we were talking about this, pardon me, before, like I said, before you came on. And I think the Master Collection pieces tell a story in that individual piece. And they haven't been battle scenes, and they haven't been anything like that. And I think that kind of a piece fits that kind of a piece. It tells a story. It encapsulates Frodo going from how happy he looked in Gandalf and Frodo on cart to where what he looks like and what he's going through in that sequence. It ties the Gollum piece with the ring and his need for it. He's still there doing that. And then you throw Sam in there for Jim because he needs a reason to buy it. I don't know. That's so when you said that's where my process started. So
I can totally see what you're describing too. I think that's absolutely beautiful. So you paint a great picture. I won't say anything about whether it's that would be an amazing collectible. So no, I totally agree. And this is the other reason I love talking to you guys, because even if we don't have something already in the works, and you guys say something like, it's like, well, that's a great idea, we should do that. or hey, we're already doing that, great that we're in sync, kind of thing, you know. So it kind of works in both ways.
And I'll play off of that then, and I'll tell my story I told Jim I was going to tell when we have been trying to get together and chat. So lay this out. This happened at Comic-Con, I don't know, it was right after it was when you guys announced that you, right at the party, remember, you announced that you guys had gotten the 6 scale license back. And we're all sitting at that one of the tables there having a drink. And I'm like, I lean over to you and I'm like, okay, now that you have the license back, I need a big Balrog. Because I had sold your first, I've owned the original Sideshow Weta Balrog twice now. I had sold it and, you know, clearing out some money and stuff, girl I was dating, that kind of thing. And so I didn't have a big Balrog, and I thought I need a big Balrog, and I like you guys need to make one now that you have, and you're taking all in, you're like, oh, that's such a great idea and everything. And then the next year, that you guys unveiled that big Balrog, and I don't know if you remember how this all rolled out, but it was the end of Comic-Con. Dad and I are leaving, we're saying our goodbyes, we stopped by and everything, and you and I are having one last chat, and you were like, hey, by the way, remember a year ago when you told me, and you're like, yeah, we had already been working on it and everything. And I'm like, that's why I'm like, you telling me you don't have a good poker face is not true at all, because you just completely, like, I mean, when I'm telling you at that party, I'm like, yeah, you guys need to do this. You're nodding your head. You're like, yes, I think that's wonderful. Yep, yeah. And then that thing comes out, and I'm like, so no, you have a great poker face.
Well, I appreciate that. It's nice of you to say, but by the same token, what you guys tell us and what you guys ask for absolutely impacts what we produce. Because ultimately, we want to make things. We want to make beautiful pieces of artwork that, one, we enjoy making, but also you guys are going to appreciate as well. And so for the Fellowship of the Ring, we had a completely different idea for what the Masters Collection piece was going to be for the Fellowship of the Ring 20th anniversary last year. And it was actually on the Flame of Vernon forum that I remember reading that one day, and I apologize, I can't remember who suggested it, but somebody said, I really would love to see, you know, the 4 hobbits hiding from the Ringwraith. And that image snapped into my head immediately. Reading that, went, oh wow, that could be a really, really special piece. And lots of the folks in our company, you know, read the forums, and we're online. We look at Facebook. We look at anywhere people are having discussions, because we ultimately want to get the pulse of what people are saying, what they're asking for, and making sure that we are staying true to what you guys are looking for. We trust our instincts on a lot of stuff, but we also, you know, check and see what people are talking about. And that seemed to really resonate with loads of people, not only online, but also within the company. And so that we pivoted and we changed the plan. And so we ditched what our original plan for the Fellowship of the Ring piece was going to be, and that became the Masters Collection for that piece. So that originated in the forums and fan discussions, definitely, amongst collectors.
Can I ask, what was the original plan then for the is it something that could possibly get made, and you'll get, you know, if you're going to get,
oh, yeah, totally. No, we just bump it down the road. It'll still happen. It'll just happen later now. But yeah, I had this idea for a Masters Collection piece that was going to be the entire Fellowship, which actually, for a lot of reasons,
we kicked that one around before you got on. Yeah.
That's still something I would hope that we can find a way to do. What scale it would be, I don't know. We need to figure that out. But
we were talking about, our idea was that, you know, that sequence where they're cresting the hill the very first time in Fellowship.
Yeah, Howard Shore's music swell. Yeah.
Get a side view of them like that.
I guess you did.
I have not bought any of the Master Collection statues yet. I have not. that would be one I would go, okay, I'm gonna slide you some cash, and I'm gonna add that one to the collection, because yeah, that would definitely be.
Yeah, and that may, in some form, that will certainly probably happen. I mean, we will definitely be going back to the Fellowship again for sure. And what scale, how we do it, whether it's a multi-piece statue that we release over a period of time, or whether it's one statue at a time, or all 9 or 10 characters if you include the pony. Who knows? But definitely we're not done with the Fellowship. I hear a lot of people out there like, I just want a really good representation of the Fellowship all from one scene. Because apart from the little miniature one that we did a little tiny miniature years ago.
A threesome, yeah.
Yeah. So totally, that's something that needs to be done. If we can do 13 dwarves, we can do 10 Fellowship members from one scene, right? So we have to. It's just about finding the way to make it happen, and it's almost happened multiple times. And for whatever reason, it's not, for different reasons. But that was one of the reasons. The Escape Off the Road was just too cool not to do. And
yes, it was a very cool piece
now, and I think people are starting to get in their hands. And Brigitte, oh my God, nobody sculpts horses like Brigitte West. It's just, that horse is so stunning. She's done a beautiful, beautiful job with it. And again, you talk about storytelling. That's exactly what that piece is about. It wasn't where we started out with the Masters Collection. When the Masters Collection began, we started with Gollum, and the thought was, let's just do single characters in like a really beautiful ultimate expression of them, 1/3 scale, and maybe that's what we'll do again in the future. But started with Gollum. The next one we were talking about was maybe we do Bilbo, and then that was like, well, actually, hang on, if we're going to do Bilbo, let's include his whole study. Let's do his desk and everything. And well, that ended up becoming a 1/6 scale piece that also is shipping out now.
I have mine. It's really truly is. I mean, I'm not in, for the people watching, I'm not saying this because I have Daniel on. It really, Jim is, we've already talked about it. It's one of my favorite pieces, because I think it's one of the best pieces you guys have ever done. It really could be a master collection piece, because it does what I was saying. It tells a story. It doesn't need, I mean, I like the action pieces. I like the Cave Troll premium statue. It's an action piece. It tells a story. There's action going on. But that Bilbo piece tells a story, and you don't need, you don't have to have stuff going crazy and everything. So it's, yeah.
I mean, goodness, that would be a contender for one of my favorite pieces for sure. And in terms of what is a Masters Collection piece and what is not, somewhat fluid. I think that certainly it didn't. That would almost qualify in my book as well. So I don't know. It's somewhat fluid, I guess. There's a tentpole piece every year, which I guess is our Masters Collection piece, and the scale and the format changes as it needs to. Treebeard is not.
Treebeard, being a perfect example of something that isn't normal scale for you guys. I mean, he's like 3 feet tall or whatever. I mean, and then like when you guys had him on that podium at Comic-Con, he's like 7 or 8 feet tall. I mean,
yeah, he wasn't going to be a Masters Collection statue. He was just a really big, premium, beautiful statue. But then as it came along, they were like, you know what, this actually kind of defines what a Masters Collection should be. And so that was the point at which we were like, okay, so Masters Collection isn't necessarily always going to be a 1/3 scale statue. It might be something else. In this case, it's 1/6. Then I think everyone since then has been 1/6, but they don't necessarily have to be. We definitely would look at other options as well. If there was a suitable character or piece or object or environment that felt like it deserved the Masters Collection treatment, it could be something else.
Well, I'll just add, and you may only have a market of one, but if you ever do Sam and Rosie's wedding, I'm all over it.
Yeah, wouldn't that be beautiful?
You could probably make like 100 of those, and Jim would just buy 100.
I just buy them.
Well, Jim, again, I'm not allowed to tell exactly what we've got coming up, but I will say that Sam figures in our plans for, and this is talking over the whole line. I'm not just talking Masters Collection here, I'm talking over the whole line, but we've got Sam coming up definitely this year and next year, because
cool.
In terms of the Two Towers and the Return of the King, Sam has wonderful moments in both of those films that we want to celebrate. So yeah, there will be Sam in some form both years. Yeah.
Well, that just means I've got to start setting the bank account aside, because it's a mandatory edition in my collection. So yeah.
You said a couple of things in there that one leads me into something Jim and I were talking about as well before you popped on, and then the other goes into kind of one of the questions that we have. So obviously you have the Amon Hen series, where obviously the statues kind of are supposed to fit together in a small deal.
Yeah.
You have the newly announced, which I did order, by the way, the Aragorn Classic series, which I think looks absolutely fantastic. It looks like, and I think it says on the product page, and I didn't memorize it for anybody watching, apologies. It looks like it's taking place obviously after Boromir's death. He's got the Vambrisson. It looks like it's in Rohan.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility? I'm asking. I'm obviously, you know, I know the restraints and everything, that, because like I said, I don't want to get you in trouble. Can we see, or is it possible, or I'm throwing an idea out there for down the road? I know, you know, we just had a Gimli and Legolas and Amon Hen, but I would love to, having seen this now, the Aragorn piece, get an individual Legolas and an individual Gimli in the classic series with similar style Rohan-ish bases, you know, the pieces, and have the three hunters in the classic series where they're chasing after Merry and Pippin. Was it intentional to put him on a base in Rohan to possibly open the door to something like that, or am I just making up a story?
No, totally. That was absolutely the creative intent. That's the hope. Obviously, things can change, and because we have just done a Legolas and a Gimli, it won't be immediately that we revisit those characters, but it's certainly, it was my creative intent when we came up, we settled on that character for Aragorn was, well, if we're going to do him as, you know, in a scene from the Two Towers on the plains, we should have a Gimli and a Legolas to go with him. So that would be my hope, is that just as we did with the Amon Hen scene, we continue to build out these expand from one release and add to it as it goes, if it's something that resonates with people, which this seems to have done, which is great.
Awesome.
Also, I mean, so that Aragorn, we went backwards and forwards a few times on exactly what moment to depict for that particular classic series statue.
Right.
Originally, it was going to be a Fellowship of the Ring statue. The Amon Hen Aragorn we did relatively recently, but because it was a low edition number, I know a lot of people missed out on that one.
Yeah.
And so
it sold out in the early bird deal. I mean, it didn't even make it to public pre-order.
It was so quick. So that, and that's a miscalculation. You know, we should have done more of them. There was some hesitation about whether another Aragorn would sell, but clearly there was demand for it. So originally when we pitched this idea was okay, well, maybe we can do an Aragorn that allows people who missed out on that one to have one to fill that scene in Fellowship. But as things developed, and we try to find ways to make them as different as possible, so we don't repeat ourselves too much, it started to make more sense to have this as a Two Towers piece. And also timing wise, it was going to fall in the Two Towers year rather than Fellowship year. So that's how we ended up becoming that. And then the thought was, well, then again, let's expand it. Let's do other characters with them. So I would say that that's the creative intent. Now, obviously, commercial reality sometimes change that, and
Right.
schedules change and things like that happen. So I can't promise absolutely, but that is definitely what we want to do. That's what we hope to do, is to eventually do the other two as well.
Well, like I said, that was when I saw that come out, well, yesterday or whatever it was. Yesterday in 2022, if you're watching this in the future.
Yeah, everybody, they're watching this a few years. Well, we got that. I have it on my shelf.
For those of you watching, it is Friday, April 8th, 2022. So you'll know what I'm talking about date-wise. But when I saw that, I thought, that was my initial thought, was like, obviously it's Two Towers. Obviously that looks like the rocks in that sequence when they're running through. And I'm like, it would make a lot of sense to do that. And I would like that, because I really like the idea of the Amon Hen series. I like that they're all tied together a little bit. I mean, you still have the beautiful bases that you guys do, but the environment that's added on top of it to create that sequence and be from that sequence, I just think is really neat. So I hope that it works out, that it does, because I think that encourages people, especially with the fact that those are open edition pieces, and there's a chance that they'll be around for a little bit.
Yep. And we're not done with Amon Hen yet either. That's Amon Hen. We're continuing to. There'll be more for that scene in the future as well. So I think it's lovely to be able to build, even when you've got a single character, it's lovely to be able to build little themes around them and have 2 or 3 characters on the shelf. Not everybody has a huge shelf space, so you know the Amon Hen scene has a lot of characters in it. I guess it's up to people how many of those they feel they want to put on their shelves together. But 2 or 3 characters together that kind of relate, it makes sense, right? So yeah, there's good sense in that.
So yeah, a couple of questions spun out on this. it's rooted in this master collection. Obviously, you guys have already locked in on what your Two Towers version is going to be. I'm curious what the time sequence is. For example, is the Return of the King Masters collection already decided, or is it still in some flux? To show you that before we got on, Josh and I were kicking around other ideas for the Two Towers Master Collection, one of which could have been the three hunters encountering Gandalf the White for the first time. And so another very iconic scene, but you're also doing Legolas and Aragorn and Gimli a lot. So not sure about all that. So that kind of lays on top of just the general process. Now, what kind of timing that it looks like, and as much as you can tell us of what's coming. And then to the scalability, one specific question I had connects to the 1/30th collection and that whole diorama that we had, and now it's kind of not in motion anymore. So you could tell us about that. I would appreciate it. So.
You bet. Let's start with the beginning of your question first, though. In terms of the timing on these things, most statues take about 6 months for us to, between probably 4 to 6 months for us to put through the workshop from concept through to developing it to actually having something ready to then, and sometimes more. If it's a more complex piece, it can be more like a year. For a Masters Collection piece, it's a year generally of sculpting and all that kind of stuff, sculpting, molding, painting, all that kind of thing, because they've become quite complex pieces. Yeah. So they get decided a year earlier. And even then, the build up to that is multiple concepts that are pitched and debated and discussed. And Richard, we have this wonderful process where he sits all of us down in the boardroom at Weta, surrounded by the collectibles that we've made, and he says, well, show me your ideas. What have you got? And we have to pitch the idea, and then he'll famously say, "Would you bet your mortgage on that? Would you take a mortgage out on that? Are you so convinced that that's a winner?" And if there's silence in the room, then he's like, "No, not doing it." Convince me. But if everybody's like, "Yes, that is awesome," and everybody in the room cheers, and he's like, "Okay, well, there's confidence in that piece, right?" That's what he's looking for. He's being facetious, but he's looking for confidence in our creative ideas. And he's like, "Well, if it, because ultimately it's his mortgage, right? That we're
That's right.
paying for the stuff. If nobody buys it, then it's lost money." So. So anyway, so the pieces take about Master Collection is about a year. So we are starting Return of the King, and we're just finishing off Two Towers.
Right.
So and sometimes it's earlier. So I think the Two Towers piece we actually started. I think it may have been almost 18 months ago, actually. Now that I think so. So we started a little earlier than what we are now, starting with Return of the King,
Gotcha.
which is the 2023 release. Yeah.
Good, thanks. And Dol Guldur is just gone. Is that?
Oh, it breaks my heart. So Dol Guldur, at the time that we kicked off the Dol Guldur 1/30th scale Hobbit collectible line, we had the head of consumer products at Weta Workshop Consumer Products of the division, with Mike Gonzalez, who was a 1/30th scale collector of beautiful little historical miniatures, military and that kind of thing. And so he was passionate, like we need to do something at a smaller scale, and let's find an iconic scene. And at the time, obviously, it was during The Hobbit, and so we were like, well, let's pick a really cool moment from the Battle of the Five Armies to launch this line. And being completely truthful with you guys, the final cost, the pricing that we ended up with for them was a problem for us. They were way more expensive than we wanted them to be. We loved the idea of building a scene and being able to build it out and actually having pieces that connect and that people could, add to. And if you wanted to just buy the figures, you could do that. If you wanted to buy the whole scene, you could do that. And so we all loved the idea, and we invested a lot of time and development into it. But ultimately, they did not really perform, and that's partially because of how expensive they were. I would volunteer that. So they didn't quite live up to expectations. However, we were all like, we all love this line. We all think this is super cool. If we can get a way around those commercial challenges, we think it can be a success. So whether it means changing to a different material rather than metal figures, or I don't know, just figuring out a different way of producing them. There are a lot of ways you could try and get around those sort of challenges. So we were committed to wanting to bring that back. And I think round about the time that we were just sort of launching back into trying to find a way to keep going, because there are pieces that we showed that we haven't released, and we would love to get those out in the collector's hands. You know, like there was the Radagast, you know, there were other pieces, other wraiths from that scene.
That's
we really
right.
wanted to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, also you feel bad if people buy into this stuff and then you don't continue. Well, you feel bad because you've promised people something and then you really want to deliver. So I keenly feel that. So I would say that the door is not completely shut on 1/30 scale. It's just that COVID made everything much harder and more expensive.
Yeah.
And so that we were right at the point of reconsidering and trying to find a fresh way to do it when that happened. And that kind of closed the box on it again for the short term. I still think there's a future for that line. We'll just have to see how things play out in the next year or two. If things settle, maybe we can still find a way, you know. And gosh, there are so many fantastic scenes that could be represented at that scale that you could really beautiful big display, you know, like Weathertop or Moria, or, you know, I think there's so many opportunities. So I feel the 1/30 scale love. There's a lot of affection for it back. We're just going to find the way to make it happen commercially. But there's certainly the artistic and fan-driven passion for it in our workshop anyway.
Amen. Well, on the collector side too, for some of us, I still have a whole shelf with dull golder just waiting for more people to show up. So,
and it's not taken for granted. I really appreciate. Thank you for supporting that line and for jumping in on something new, because, you know, obviously every time we launch a new expression, a new scale or something like that, or a new material, you're taking part, you're hoping that people will back it. So I really want to say thank you very much for backing that. Really appreciate it. Now we need to live up to what we promised.
We'll stay tuned.
Well, I think if you guys can figure out the production aspect of it, I mean, obviously, metal anything is going to be expensive. I mean, the old helms were metal, and you can't do the helms in today's world. And I think that sometimes Jim and we talked about that. I think the last episode of the podcast, you know, we kind of got into, you know, value and that kind of stuff, and when the cost of collectibles goes up or whatever.
At the moment, man.
I think sometimes people don't think about that particular aspect of it, in that, you know, when those, like I said, those original helms were metal. You can't do the helms now because of the rising cost of material to do that. The wages of the workers in China making the stuff has increased. Getting stuff from China to the United States, or China to the UK, or from China to New Zealand or whatever, the transport costs have all gone up. So that helm that was, what were they, like $40 or something 20 years ago? It would probably, I bet it would be 3 times that if you did it in metal now. And so
we could
really cool. I was shocked they were metal, because you had talked about the helms before, and I was shocked when I got the set from Anthony when he had me review them. I was like, these things I've got them sit out in front of my TV where I play Xbox, and I was shocked that they were metal, because so I understood why the costs were. So I think if you guys can figure out the production aspect of it, there's plenty of people that would at minimum finish off the Hobbit set because they're invested in it. And then, you know, if you guys decided to go Lord of the Rings for a while, because they're probably going to find a larger swath of collectors that want to do that, you got Moria, you got Pelennor Fields, you got Helm's Deep, you've got multiple sequences where you could do little battle scenes. Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, and stuff in The King of the Dead, and, you know, there's things that you could do that I think people would do that if the figures were, you know, the resin or whatever, you know, or polystone type material or something. I think people would do those. Once you guys figure out the production stuff, I think there's a demand for it. I think that people would want those.
I think a lot of the materials that you use are a lot of times affected by the run size that you can expect to make. You know, for example, if you want to make something out of plastic, you need a huge run size because you need to do metal molds for that kind of stuff. And so you're talking tens of thousands as opposed to, you know, a few hundred or something like that, things like that. I mean, you know, we're talking about the helms. You know, I was heartbroken that we had to stop making metal helms and we had to now start making them in polystone. We could make metal helms, but they would be double the price they are now. So you'd be looking at $200+ American dollars for a helm, which is ridiculous. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to spend that, unfortunately. So that's why the compromise was, well, let's make them in polystone. the one benefit of that is it actually has a finer detail than the metal helms that we used to produce. So the new helms have they're more detailed. The detail's more crisp on them than the metal ones were, but you don't have that wonderful heft in your hand. I get that because I'm a helm collector. I've got my cabinet over back here. Where is it now? Yeah, back in the corner over here is full of helms. But yeah, I know what you mean. There's something so wonderful about those lovely big metal helms. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe the world will change and we can go back to them again. We do. I ask all the time. Any chance one can be in metal, and they're like, no, I'm sorry, we just can't. We can't afford it. You know, whatever. How many would we have to make in order to be able to do that kind of thing? But yeah, it's tough. But we do constantly ask these questions because things change. At the moment, they're changing up, and everything's getting more expensive, which is really challenging. And that's the point we were talking about before about the lead times in developing products. So, you know, for example, if we come up with a concept and we're imagining a particular collectible and we're imagining it at a certain price point and we design it that way, it starts getting made. If a year later we finish making it and then we send it to the factory and actually it gets quoted, and a lot of the times because the rising costs, it's now going to cost way more to make than it was when we originally started designing it. And so therefore we have to then, if we go through with it, we don't axe it completely, then it's going to cost more for the consumer, for the collector as well. And so yeah, that's really challenging. It's a tough time to be it's a tough time to be a collectibles maker at the moment, and it's also very tough to be a collector because we're both faced with the same choice, which is how high can we go? How high is too much? You know, so yeah, it's difficult. So I really, as a collector myself, I really feel the squeeze too. You know, with rising production costs because they always get passed on to the consumer, and then there's shipping and stuff on the top of that, which is also crazy right now.
Which is interesting because, as you pointed out, you're trying to, as a collectible maker, find differing price points because there are master collectors, but then in theory the 1/30th scale was going to be accessible to a different kind of a collector, but it would still be expandable so that someone who really does want to create the whole scene. So it just has lots of different entry points, and yet the supply chain issues and cost of materials are conspiring against us, and so
it's challenging. That's why as you say, we do try to have different tiers, even from like the helms represent something, hobbit holes, mini statues going up to the classics series. Obviously we've got mini epics, that kind of stuff. So we try to pitch it multiple different tiers because you want to make, at least as a fan, I would love to have something that I can afford to buy in my comfort zone that expresses my. So we try to pull in all these. But yeah, as I say, at the moment, we're really finding the squeeze. And so some of those are rising more than we'd like them to. But then also then we have to get creative as we're designing new product in the future to try and make sure that we constantly rein that stuff in. And okay, what do we sometimes we have to sacrifice a few things. There are the number of statues that I've pitched over the years that have had like a swappable head or a swappable hand or, sort of that kind of stuff, and then you get down the road and suddenly, you're fitting the squeeze, the prices are going up, the costs are going up and you have to change something. That's the first thing to go is like, well, we can't do the ultimate head anymore. We can't do the ultimate sword, whatever, that kind of stuff, but we can still produce it for this category or this price range or things like that. So there are ways around it. And then also just designing it so that, okay, we know exactly how many times the paintbrush is going to have to go down on this piece to make it, which means we know exactly how much it's going to cost for the factory to produce it. Then we can backplan from that and keep things costs under control that way. The hobbit holes definitely fit in that. They're made with a very, very specific price range in mind. Having said that, that's had to just bump as well. So it's all I'm saying is I feel your pain as collectors because I'm in that boat too, both at work and then at home as a buyer of the stuff as well. I buy the Weta stuff and I buy from other companies too.
What do you buy?
What do I buy?
As a collector, we had a whole show on this where Josh and I talked about, well, what's our advice to somebody who's just starting out, or as someone who's collected for a long time? How do you do something other than just buy one of everything, which is Josh's problem, I guess. And you saw here's my one helm that I have. You might imagine which one it is.
Sam's helm.
Sam's helm, because it's Sam. So for me, there's some focus areas. So, but for you, as a collectible maker, what do you collect, and how do you decide what that is?
So for the Lord of the Rings stuff, for Middle Earth, I'm all in on the helms, and I'm all in on the hobbit holes.
Yep.
And that's partially because I just love them as beautiful little objects. They're at a price range that I can sustain and also negotiate with my significant other. So, and as objects, they're something that she's comfortable having and displaying in the home as well. I think it would be different if I was bringing home Balrogs and trolls and stuff like that. Those probably don't resonate as well in the living room. But so I collect them. I bought a bunch of the Kong stuff back in the day, the dinosaurs and skulls kind of thing. I just really love those. Again, they feel like sort of museum pieces. There's a nice, I love that sensibility. So that's the stuff. So yeah, of our stuff, that's the kind of thing I collect. And then being a big Star Wars and Star Trek nerd, I collect lots of action figures and which, again, a few years ago, I started out buying action figures that were like $10, and now you're spending multiple hundreds on a vehicle for action figures, which is crazy to think that. If I'd known that back in the day, would I have started? I don't know. Yeah, probably. But it's definitely, the hobby has changed. It has evolved. And all of us have the point at which we have to say enough. That's kind of obscene. That's crazy. I get, we all have those different breaking points.
What's the Arkenstone of your collection?
Oh, wow. Shoot, I'm just looking around the room because some of it's out displayed here. Man, I don't know. I've got a Salacious Crumb up there from Star Wars that I absolutely love, who's kind of like the life-size Salacious Crumb. There he is up in the corner. Yeah. He's pretty high on the list. Yeah, I don't know. Oh man, I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't really have a favorite. I like them all. Yeah. For my Star Wars stuff, I buy the action figures and I build dioramas. And so I think so. In that way, I guess it's the totality of a scene that I've created that I love. So. Yeah. Yeah. How about for you?
Probably because it was one of my first, I guess it was a Sideshow Weta piece, was Sam and Bill the Pony. It was like the first.
That's such a beautiful piece too. That was sculpted by Warren Mahi. He was the best man at my wedding. So I love that one.
And it's a simple piece, and yet it's telling such a story around it. And then Sam started accumulating from there in different guises. But some of them, they're pieces that we've actually commissioned. So we've got a really good friend that does pyrography. He burns maps, and so he's done a Narnia map for us, and he's done a Middle Earth map for us, of which I think Stephen Colbert is one of 5 or 6 people that also has another copy of it. We commissioned a Numenor map because of the new Amazon series coming up from him. So those are definitely Arkenstone worthy. But like you, it's hard because there really are several really resonating pieces, the kinds of things you go back to and say, I love. So the master collection of Frodo and Gandalf on the cart, and that's prominently featured. I walk by it every time I come into my nerd cave office. And I just love that piece because of the moment that it's expressing, and the fact that it has all of these removable fireworks in the back of the cart that I can just look at and say, wow, this is really cool. So, yeah.
You mentioning the one-off pieces and commission pieces, that suddenly recontextualizes the whole conversation for me. I think then my Arkenstone piece would have to be, there's a painting I've got on the wall back there. You probably can't see it from here, but it's as a Star Wars fan, I obviously collect stuff from that world as well. And I had the very, very good fortune of befriending Dave Filoni, who currently is, he show runs basically. he and Jon Favreau are, incredibly pushing out all this amazing content right now. So I met Dave Filoni when he was back on making the creative director of the Clone Wars, overall director of the Clone Wars, and we would just see each other again. It's at conventions, we run into each other once a year sort of thing. But I gave him a gift one year I gave him a drawing of Treebeard holding Yoda, and they were having a conversation
Oh,
together. And just expressing my admiration, you know,
Right.
and enjoyment of what he and his amazing team were producing. And he surprised me the next year with this painting that he'd done, which is Gandalf. It's actually Gandalf sitting on a log with Yoda sitting next to him, and it's just beautiful. Gandalf is blowing smoke rings, and Yoda is using the Force to shape them, and he's shaping the face of Darth Vader out of this smoke ring, and they're musing on it together, like, is this the future kind of thing? It's so stunning, and I cried when he gave it to me. It was so beautiful. So that would probably be my Arkenstone, I think.
Interesting. And that merging of ideas, because it's so my name at on the One Ring is Mad Eye Gamgee. So it speaks into the convergence of character and culture. And so mostly in my nerd cave, it's all Lord of the Rings stuff, except for one Mad Eye Moody pointing his wand at me.
Awesome.
Off there in the corner. So
do you have that custom red book that us have, the Indy Magali custom red book? Do you have that?
This guy.
Oh wow, look at that.
I sent Jim, I've had mine for a long time. Rumi got it years ago, and she showed me her copy, and I was like, that's amazing. And so when I had sold some stuff, some Marvel and Star Wars stuff, I bought one. And then here a while back, Jim was like, he wanted the link. So I sent him the link to the website. When I paid for it, it was the best $500 I've probably ever spent on a collectible.
That's fun.
It's really, really, I mean, it's like, it's got its stuff on every page. It's like, it really is, it's as close to a prop that you guys might have used as we could ever do. If you don't have that, you should, I'll send you the link if you want the link.
And the fun thing about this is it's bridging from, they really thought a lot about it. And it bridges from what Bilbo's writing, and then it changes handwriting, and then Frodo starts telling the whole Lord of the Rings. And at the very end, you've got place for Sam, and he's written some stuff into it. So it's
really cool.
Really well done.
It's really
cool. Another Arkenstone. So.
Yeah, it is really, really cool. So if you're looking to add something to your collection that's kind of special, one-off type piece, I mean, obviously it's not a one-off, but that's definitely something to think about, because it's well worth it's one of those pieces. If the Balrog wasn't going to be my favorite piece, that's kind of like my favorite piece that's not from Weta or from Sideshow or whoever. It's a really, really neat piece.
Awesome. Yeah, I sense another very, very awkward conversation with my wife in the future.
Oh no! Sorry about that, but
yeah, you're gonna get me in trouble.
Here's what I did. I gave it to my wife, and then I took it back.
Yeah, she'd see right through that. She'd be like, "Oh, you just giving me a gift for you. I know what you're doing here." Luckily, Catherine is far too clever for that. She knows me too well.
Yeah.
Josh, something that I keep seeing it behind you. Your wallpaper behind you is that magnificent art print by Jerry van der Stel.
Yeah.
And that triggers something that I wanted to mention, which is that we have a collaboration that we've done with Jerry this year.
Oh, nice.
One of the pieces that we're going to be coming out with, I think it's a San Diego Comic-Con reveal, is one that we've worked in collaboration with Jerry on. So he's done a piece of artwork, and we've got a collectible that are essentially based on the same, if not the same moment, then certainly themed around the same character or same scene. So that's a little tidbit I'll throw out there. Jerry's such a lovely, lovely man, and it's always such a pleasure working with him.
I love him to death. That's another one of those people. And same for you. And I've gotten to know Richard a little bit over the years, and so many of the other people at Weta, Jules and everybody. I mean, there's just so many people that, I'm trying to think who else has been there over the years. Oh gosh.
I mean, we're all just passionate nerds, right? Just
right.
Sharing our love for this stuff together. Yeah.
And I've been very lucky that to make friends and become friends with so many of you. And Jerry's just really, really, really super nice and just a really, really cool person. So yeah, I love that when you guys team up and do those kinds of things, because it's a neat tie-in. It's a neat way to add a piece to a collection, but also get an art print of his, because he's obviously very, very talented. And I think I don't know. I think that's a really neat. I think that's a really neat addition to be able to, because his work is, like anybody else, there's a cost that comes to it. So if you can nail two birds, one stone, it's really nice when you can do that. Leonard Ellis. I was blanking on Leonard's name for me. I'm sorry, Leonard.
Yes, Leonard makes hobbit holes in environments, and yeah.
So I've been, so for me, like I said, I've been very lucky to get to know you guys and know Jerry and everything. So when my worlds come crashing together and I can get something from Jerry and something from you guys, that's always a win too. So I'm happy to hear that you guys are doing some more stuff with him, because you did the ring wraith with that at the Ford. Yeah, that was the first one that you guys did with him, right? Have you guys?
It was the ring wraith and Arwen. So that was a case where we had some collectibles that we were making, and Jerry produced a beautiful art print in the same theme with them. This is it's similar to that, but it's a little bit different in the sense that this is, it was an idea that we talked about together and we kind of worked on together and went backwards and forwards each other. And so, some of the things that Jerry suggested made their way into the collectible, and some of the things that we've suggested would make their way into his piece of artwork. So it's a little bit more interrelated perhaps, and a bit more backwards and forwards than that one was.
Oh, so, yeah. Nice. That'll be cool.
Yeah, so look, there was a bit more creative synergy going on, creative collaboration going on this one. Yeah,
well,
so
him and I talked about, well, it's been a few years ago now. I think it might have been right around when you guys put out that Balrog statue, because he has that one Balrog print where it's, he's screaming out, and we were talking about how it would be neat if the statue had matched that and everything, and the fact that you guys are doing more of that now with some of the pieces, I think is really cool. Because like I said, if you're someone like me who likes the art prints, and I have several of Jerry's, I mean, I use this as my background for whether or not we're doing this, or if I'm doing a Zoom, if I do a Zoom meeting at work or whatever, I have that back there, so people have to know that I like Lord of the Rings. So, but that's his work is really cool. So it's just when you, like I said, when you have your two worlds crashing together in that regard, that's really nice.
Excellent. And if you need to, Sauron can give the back of your head a little scratch there too.
That's right. So you obviously talked about liking the ends. I was going to ask this here a little while ago, but we got into a really good discussion, so I didn't want to interrupt with that question. But you obviously like the ends. That is a special thing for you. Were there similarities in the process? And I'm going with this question here of designing the Treebeard statue, versus doing, working actually on like the Treebeard thing pieces that we saw in the movie. Like, obviously is that were there similarities in doing some of that? Were you able to pull from your experience and your guys' experience doing that to do the collectible? Did it help it? Was it something different? I mean, how did those worlds merge when you're doing that?
Being involved in designing Treebeard for the film, and then being involved in helping make the big gigantic version of him that we actually had on set, the big puppet, and how that was fabricated out of lots of we took castings of real bark and things like that, and laid those on them. I think the process was quite different for the collectible, which was for the most part digitally sculpted, but it certainly helped in the art direction of that collectible, and having that familiarity with him. And this is one of the things that I feel we're very lucky with, is that we can actually go, in most cases, we can usually access the original proper costume. So being able to actually just go down the road and take photographs of the actual Treebeard and then bring it back, certainly that was enormously valuable in making sure that there was accuracy in the details. But the actual process of creating them was quite different in that the Treebeard that we made for the movie was a very physical process, and the collectibles for the most part digital, only because the artists that were working on it prefer to work digitally. At Workshop, I still love the fact that most of the collectibles we make have at least some more physical and some digital components, and we do a lot of the turns. Some of them are split right down the middle, where half is digital, half is physical. But it all comes down to just how people prefer to work, what makes the most sense for that particular statue. So yeah, so it's really cool that you can have somebody who is 3D sculpting on something, working on a portrait perhaps in 3D on their computer, and then turns around and sculpts the rest of the statue, in plasticine. It's really cool to see, which is a total segue from where we were going from.
And that's a very interesting. I mean, it all ties together. No, it makes sense. What about the process? Obviously, you have the Treebeard bust, and I know you were involved with the Treebeard bust. Did that? I mean, were you able to use that to help you make the statue in any way?
As reference, certainly, but the sculpt was begun from scratch in those cases. Sometimes where we have a sculpt, particularly with likenesses, if we have a good likeness already, we will use that as a starting point if we are going to revisit a character or something like that. And I'm talking about if we're working in 3D, digital sculpts will, or sometimes physical as well. We'll take a mold of it and use it as the basis just to start. But almost every likeness, for example, is usually a new sculpt, starting with what we had, but then trying to improve on, like always trying to improve on it and get it better. And there are some characters, as we all know, who are just ridiculously elusive and tough to get right. Others are easier. But generally speaking, we'll use anything we can to give ourselves a leg up, a head start on something, because that just makes sense, right? But we're also looking to try and improve at each point as well.
Who's hard and who's easy?
The hardest characters, I think, are Orlando Bloom and Viggo Mortensen. They're just so difficult. There are some fantastic statues out there in the market, some ours, some other people's, with those characters. And then there are also a lot that look nothing like them. And I can say that because 20 odd years ago, I sculpted a Legolas. It looked nothing like Orlando Bloom, nothing like him, because I just wasn't up to it. And at the time, you could get away with that. Now there's no way you could. There's no way we could release that statue now. But yeah, so that speaks to also how things have improved and progressed over the years.
Does the digital sculpting help with that? I mean, as far as, especially specifically those two human beings, because Viggo especially, the Aragorn at Amon Hin, I think, is really, really good. And I think the new one that came out is really, really good. But does digital sculpting help with that? Because
yes, because
essentially, I guess, can you bring in a photo of them and put it kind of into a program that allows you to use that photo in a way to do that? Or is it still just you have a digital block of clay with digital tools and you're scraping away at it, doing it that way?
It's more that. I mean, if you're lucky, you may have an actual 3D scan of an actor's face to use. That would be amazing. And that gives you but it's never the end point. That's always a starting point, because expression is key. And also you're replicating them at scale. And so when you're replicating a likeness at scale, it's not literally a one-to-one copy of their face scaled down. You have to actually exaggerate certain features because they look different when you scale them down. It's even to do with focal length, things look different. And also it has to be able to take paint. You want to have to make sure that the paint's going to settle in on an eyelash line, that kind of stuff. But little things like expression, whether the actor is looking up or down or this way, that, it all makes much more of a difference than you would expect. Pardon me, I'm my voice here a little bit.
No, trust me, I've been going through a bottle of water drink while we've been.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot that goes into it. So there's always a lot of retouching, even when you are lucky enough to have a digital scan that is actually, and most of the time they're quite rough, but sometimes you can get one that's actually really, really good. There's still quite a lot of work in doing and really nailing that likeness and putting the essence of the character in them, because a lot of the time they're a passive face, and it may technically have the bone structure of that actor, but has no essence of the character in them, unless you bring that to it through the performance, or in our case, the expression that you put into the statue. So there's a lot more to it, but it's certainly, you always like to have those kind of assets to start off with, even if they're just reference. But We don't always. Sometimes we're starting from scratch. Most of the time, at the very least, you have good photographs. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you have a 3D asset that you can use as well.
Oh, nice. Obviously, you have new techniques, but the digital sculpting is something that's changed. You know, obviously over the last few years, especially the Arwen, you know, and Frodo on horse. It introduced, for you guys at least, I think, kind of a new process in like making that like chiffon material, almost, you know, being able to create that see-through. Is that, you know, how did you guys decide to get to that process and do it that way? And has it changed already since that statue came out to kind of take that next step?
We're always looking for ways to keep progressing and find ways to make things either more authentic looking or more interesting looking, or bring the statues to life in new ways. I think more recently we've been leaning into doing a lot more with electronics and actually having lights that move, because again that brings it to life. So there's stuff like that we're looking into, and doing more and more of. That's something that, you know, we've been wanting to do for years, but it's sort of we couldn't quite get it to work in the beginning, but now we can. What do you got there? Oh, there we go. Look at that. Yeah, exactly. There you go. And that brings it to life, right? So where it makes sense to do so, and where it economically makes sense to do so as well, we're looking at ways to do more and more of that. There's a few things coming out this year. Galadriel's files just come out, which is actually glass, which is beautiful. It has little metal cast pieces on it, and you can actually put liquid in it if you want to, and it has a bulb in the base. I've seen some very creative and really, really awesome versions of that, where people have experimented with different kind of liquids to put into it to try and get a really, really beautiful effect.
Some kind of material, and it recreated the light. You probably have seen the photo that I'm talking about. They mentioned what material was, and it was the liquid, how it worked with the light. It was really freaking cool.
Really beautiful. So that's wonderful. Like, we had actually looked at whether we could actually literally ship it with the perfect liquid in it to replicate what you see on screen, but that was all kinds of difficult. So in the end,
I'm sure there's red tape all over the place for that, something like that.
It gets really crazy, and you know if it goes wrong, then you've got stuff everywhere, right? It would be no good. So in the end, the decision was made to keep that as just dry glass, that people can have the choice of putting stuff in themselves. But yeah, there's some amazing results out there. It always blows me away how creative and inventive people can be with with what they create from scratch, but then also, you know, taking something that might be factory made and lifting it to a whole nother level just with something simple and beautiful like that.
Yeah, the liquids that people were using on that are really fantastic, and taking something that's obviously a very beautiful piece to begin with and just adding something to it. But for you guys, like when you're doing like the chiffon pieces, is that for you guys? That's obviously not obviously a little bit sideways back to, you know, away from the putting like the liquid, but is that a hard process for you guys to do because of you know, that because of how to create that right look to where it's thin and stuff like that?
Sometimes there's a bit of R&D, yeah, for sure. I can't remember speaking to that one specifically exactly, but the details on it. But yeah, sometimes it just, you know, requires a little bit more effort and a little bit more work to find the right material and to make sure that it's going to replicate the effect that you want. There have definitely been pieces that we've had to just take a guess on and go, you know what, we want to make it look like this. We won't know if it's going to work until it's actually done, and you just hope. And thankfully, it's always worked out. But yeah.
Have you guys thought about on some of those pieces like that? I mean, almost like a premium format type, you know, like what I mean to use to compare like what Cypher does with like the mix of the cloth and everything on like an Arwen or something like that had where is that real thing of actually using real material in that instance, or would that be a harder job for you guys on a production end?
It depends, I think, on the statue. I think if you've got a character that is relatively static and you can use fabric on it and it's going to hang the right way, that works. It's difficult. And for example, the Arwen piece you're speaking of is Arwen on Asphaleth, and so the horse is kind of rearing and she's kicking up, and so you know, her fabric is in motion, and unless you wire it, and you can certainly do that, you can wire the fabric to try and give it a shape. That's hard to do with actual fabric. And also what tends to happen, I think, is that works beautifully at like 1/3 scale, 1/4 scale. It starts getting more difficult as you go down in scale because the fabric starts to become too big, you know, for the collectible, unless you can be very inventive and find fabrics that replicate what you're looking for at a smaller scale. Certainly, we're not specialists in that, and so we've definitely looked into it. We've definitely explored it. We had a 1/4 scale, I believe it was, or was it 1/3? I can't remember now. Chamberlain from the Dark Crystal in development for a couple of years. That was going to be mixed media and have, you know, and if you know those characters terribly well from that film, their fabric that they wear is just opulent, and it's covered in layers of distressing and printed materials and all kinds of stuff. It's just, they're richly adorned. And we, after a couple of years of development, just could not get that to the level that we needed it to be. That's just not our specialty. So in the end, that was a product that we didn't release. We repurposed some of the tooling and made a 1/6 scale version as well. It was sculpted with sculpted fabric, which I think looks great. But it is definitely a different art form, and I think you need people who really are specialists in those particular skills. It's not to say we couldn't in the future. We're always looking for how we can integrate different materials to, as you say, bring something to life. We've used a bit of fake foliage and stuff like that in some of them, by example.
Well, your Dark Galadriel piece is a good example of,
yeah, there you go,
real motion, but you couldn't accomplish it with actual textile fabric because it's, you know, it's a windblown.
Well, it's fun you mentioned that too. So where we can, we'll do reference photo shoots for this stuff, and so we were able to actually access the costume for that. And I don't know if any of these images have been shared online, but so we had Brigitte West sculpted that piece, but Jane Wenley, who's another of our sculptors, modeled the costume.
Yeah, you released a video when it came.
Oh, cool, yeah. Great. It was so much fun. So Mark Hughes, who is works in our consumer products division, art directs our Figures of Fandom line. Mark actually was there, you know, in the studio with this huge, great big fan. And he's blowing the fan, and the fabric's flying everywhere. It was, I mean, it's super fun to get to do that kind of stuff. So, but obviously, yes, to replicate that and actually in a collectible, it really needed to be sculpted in that instance. And thankfully, Brigitte did a masterful job with it.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Gosh, I don't know how much time we have left, but I don't want to lose Daniel without turning the corner on more of the what's coming question. You know, and obviously, you know, you've got to be careful about what you can. But I'm just interested in, you know, because we've got not only the anniversaries coming, but we also have new things coming. And you know, even if it's just, what do you think about what we've been seeing, like on the Rings of Power stuff? Because we're starting to see images and environments and weapons and costumes and characters. We're starting to see, you know, stuff, even the animated stuff that's coming out with the Rohirrim and Helm Hammerhand. So, you know, I'm curious, as both a collector and a collectibles maker, you know, what are you thinking? And what can you tell us?
Isn't it an exciting time to be a Middle-earth fan with all this new media coming? Like, you know, I think we all sort of had the feeling like the things were done, right? And then now there's all this new stuff coming. So I'm reminded of what it was like back in before the Fellowship of the Ring came out, you know, 20 plus years ago now. Seeing the trailers, and every new image you dissect, you know, and you're trying to figure out what stuff is. So it's really cool with the Rings of Power images that have been come out, that beautiful trailer they released. That's been fun. And obviously, as you say, we've got the War of the Rohirrim coming out a little bit later. I think that's 2024, I think it is. But yeah, it's an exciting time to be a Middle-earth fan and collector, potentially an expensive time, I suspect. But yeah, I can't wait to see this stuff. And it's obviously, as you say, an exciting time to be a collectibles producer as well, because anytime that a property like that gets a new fresh shot in the arm, it gets there's a whole lot of new subject matter to be created. There's a whole lot of new potential collectors that are going to discover and come to the hobby as well through the new media as well. So yeah, I mean, I hope that will attract them to the stuff that we make, and I hope they'll like it. As far as new licenses, I can't say anything. There's nothing I can say on that. But yeah, it's a fun time I always love this phase right before something new comes out,
Right.
when it's ripe with possibility, right? You know, we don't know what it's going to be, and so it could be anything, and so your mind gets so excited. It's almost, once you finally see it, you go, oh, okay, you know. It's like, it's that wonderful time where anything might happen. Yeah, I love it. But in terms of what to expect this year, in terms of stuff coming up, so yes, there'll be a big focus on the Two Towers this year. From our collectibles that we're making. However, there are a handful of Fellowship of the Ring items that have sort of bumped through into this year, of classic series coming up. One of them coming forward, the next classic series is Two Towers focus, but we have 2 Fellowship of the Ring classic series coming, which I think should make it out before the end of the year. That the timing on that may change. It's also the 10th anniversary of An Unexpected Journey, right? So we're not going to forget that. So there's some Hobbit stuff coming this year as well to help celebrate that. What else can I say without getting myself in trouble? I probably said too much already.
We really don't mind. If you
no, you don't mind, but I have to answer for it on Monday, right? So I had to be careful. Let me think. That's probably as much as I can say without seriously jeopardizing my career. Yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff. I think the end of this year is going to look a little bit like the end of last year in terms of some of the bigger pieces that they are coming out. We are trying to spread them out as much as we can, because I know last year was pretty brutal with a lot of quite big pieces coming out close together, which is obviously very, very challenging as a collector. You know, it makes you forced to choose when things comes out too close together, and you know, they compete with each other. So we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. But there are definitely in the latter half of the year going to be some pretty spectacular pieces to help celebrate the anniversaries, because we also have, in addition to the Two Towers anniversary 20 years this year and Unexpected Journey 10 years, we've also got the Dark Crystal 40 years. Labyrinth last year was 35. We missed that, but we've got a bunch of Labyrinth stuff coming out now. I think we've just recently released a video teasing some of what is to come. So there's more of that to be seen in the future as well. Yeah.
You guys keep chatting. I got to step away for just a second. Be right back.
Cool. Yeah. So I'll just say, my hope as a collector is that you and Weta will be involved in a lot of that, because your attention to the detail, your attention to fandom, your passion, as well as your craft in how you approach these many things. You know, I'm hoping that bridges over to some new properties and some of this perspective stuff coming out. As much as I love also the retrospective stuff that is getting created. I'm glad that you told me about, you gave me a heads up on a couple of Sam oriented items, because I got to keep my powder dry. Have my own conversations with my wife about making sure that we've got room in the budget for those. So that's good.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's. I mean, thank you. I appreciate it. It's not taken for granted, the kind words and the confidence that you place in us. I really appreciate that. Certainly, if anything's going that's Middle Earth related, I'm always looking to try and get involved in some way if I can, just because it's a way to, if you're working while expressing your love for something at the same time, it doesn't feel like work. So that's always good. By the same token, I'm also excited for some of the new voices that we're going to get to hear from on these things as well, right? We've got new creative voices in the room of Middle Earth with their own stories to tell, with their own interpretation on that world. And then new audiences to discover it that way as well. So I'm excited about that, because I think it'll help keep things fresh, and fresh perspectives on it are always a good thing.
I'm curious if you see, it connects into popularity of characters, for example. So we know in the new series that Galadriel will be heavily featured, and we're gonna see a lot of her backstory, some of which will be created, and some of which will have real connection into the Tolkien legendarium. But whatever it is, it means that the Galadriel that we've seen in the Hobbit series and that we've seen in the Lord of the Rings series will probably increase in fan recognition and fan top of mind. So will that kind of thing start, it's got to start influencing, well, maybe we take another you had recent releases of the Galadriel figure as an example. But if we're going to see a young Elrond, so will that start to influence? Maybe we need to do an Elrond. That hasn't been a prominently featured character in the past. So how are you guys thinking about that?
I mean, those are the kind of conversations that we have all the time when we're trying to select what collectibles are we going to release in the coming years, and so you're always thinking about what's in the public consciousness, certainly. And not just with respect to new properties coming out and new expressions, but what resonates with people. What haven't we done recently? What deserves a fresh expression, or perhaps has a version of it that hasn't been seen before that people would like to see. So those conversations are happening all the time, definitely. We have, generally speaking, we have a period of the year where we're all pitching ideas for what's to come, and these ideas all get into a big melting pot, and they get siphoned, and the best ones hopefully rise to the top. They get debated, but then also over the course of the year, as new information comes out, new ideas come through, we try to have some flexibility where new things can find their way in as well, which is a roundabout. I know that I didn't answer your question exactly.
Yep.
But
good. Yeah.
yeah. But I guess what I'm saying is that it's all part of the selection process, right? So yeah.
And it's hard. Yeah, because I'm a Silmarillion reader and a book lover. And so for me, when the prospect says, wouldn't it be cool, because we know that we're going to have Gil-galad and Elendil featured in this new series, and we've already seen them in the prologue to the first movie. Wouldn't it be cool to have them in a confrontation with Sauron? But that could be wildly eclectic. There's 3 or 4 people that will really get into that kind of or maybe it won't. Maybe it will explode. Who knows? But
I have told Daniel before I can't remember if it's been in person or not, but and I've told other people at Weta this as well. I am for sure gonna buy. I've already got a Sildor. I will buy an Elendil statue, and I will buy it. I always say Gil-galad. I know that's probably not I've always said it that way, and I'm sure I'm butchering it. So anybody watching this going, "Good Lord, can this dude from Missouri say these names right?" But I would buy those because I really, really love that sequence. So I've got the Sauron coming, and I know you've said on the Flame that their intention is to do Elendil and stuff from.
It's just like Amon Hen. We're building that scene out. So Elendil will be the next one you see. Gil-galad is coming, but he's a little bit poor Gil-galad. He keeps getting, when the schedules get bumped, Gil-galad, by whatever reason, he's always end up getting bumped. He's definitely coming, but he's a little bit further off than Elendil is. Elendil will be the next one you see.
Fantastic. I have the original Sideshow Weta bus. And I've ever since I got that from my dad as a birthday gift, and getting to see that armor up close like that, I've wanted since that I got that. I'm like, I want a full statue because the armor is just so well done on that bust, even with the painting and the sculpting technologies that were available 20 plus years ago. Whenever that was, it's I'm like, I want a full statue. So. And then with how well that a Sildor statue was done, I just want Eglin's. I just want his spear. If you could just make his spear.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy that after all these years, there's still characters, there's still subject matter in those materials, those films that we haven't touched yet? How many hundreds of statues we've made since, and I still am blown away by how rich that source material is for stuff. So, well, I mean, just to piggyback on that, I know Ithilden on the Flame has bugged you several times about Denethor, and that's a character that, despite the success of those films, hasn't been done. And I thought your explanation on the Flame the other day was I really liked it, because you really kind of, you'd talked about it but never really gone in depth. You really kind of laid out, hey, listen, we really want to do Denethor. It's a character we're gonna do. We just have to find, and you went into greater detail than this for people watching, but because of it's got to be able to sell a certain amount in order for it to be
worth doing. That it's finding the right series. Obviously you have the classic series now, stuff like that. To be able to do a character like that. Does the classic series make Denethor more possible? Because it being open edition, you could allow him to be there and maybe sell longer, because and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I've always been under the impression, based on what on bits of information, that the hobbits, when I say hobbits, I mean the Hobbit characters for people watching, were slower sellers. Does the classic series make it more likely that you may get a Hobbit statue, Sam or Frodo or somebody, you marry Pip and whatever, and it allowed to, it be an open edition, and it, allowed to be available for a year and sell enough to make it worth doing? Does the classic series make characters like Denethor, or maybe some of the slower selling characters, say a Hobbit or whatever, more available to do because of that, because of the open edition nature? Or do they have to be limited because it narrows the amount of money maybe you have to put into it to do, if that's how it works? Because I mean, I'm spitballing, I have no idea.
I think with a character like Denethor, you're probably realistically not going to sell, thousands of units. That's right. The kind of thing that has more niche appeal. Mm-hmm. So whether that's a good fit for classic series, or whether there's something else, or if it's maybe a classic series statue in sort of size and price range, but maybe it actually is limited edition. I don't know. I mean, I guess they're all limited edition in the sense they're just not numbered. But these are all good questions, and questions. I'm more on the creative side of things, so these are probably more for the folks who have to balance the numbers. But the more different types of products that we have, the more different types of collectibles you can release, the better, the more opportunity we have to find the right fit for a character like Denethor, definitely. So yeah, and I'm amazed that we haven't done Denethor yet after all these years. But hey, Return of the King anniversary is coming up next year. I kind of feel like hopefully next year is Denethor's year. I will be waving the flag for Denethor. I'll be the guy pushing. Please let us do him. Whether I win,
just don't make it flaming Denethor.
What's that?
Just don't make it flaming Denethor. Well, you could do it as an April Fool's joke. That would be funny. You could put out like a flaming Denethor ad or something. Oh my God, people that would be crushed after all these years never to get a Denethor statue. Hey, we're doing flaming Denethor. Oh.
He actually moves. He goes across the top.
Yeah, right. He runs.
You could put the light effect into it, like you did with the Balrog, where it looks like it's waving it. Good. People are gonna throw tomatoes at me for that one. But, I mean, I that's one of those characters that another one that I would like to just thought processes and stuff as we kind of wind down here with you and not keep you too much longer. A Theoden on Snowmate. We finally got Éomer, and it was funny, right before Éomer came out, and I want to say it might have been Leonard and I having a conversation, but we were talking about, it was either Jack or Leonard, I can't remember who I was talking to specifically, but we were talking about how Rohan being the horse people, and up to Éomer coming out, there had never been,
isn't that crazy,
character on a horse. It was like, and we both stood there, and like I said, I'm pretty sure it was Leonard, but we were both like, it just, when those words came out of my mouth, him and I were both just like, it just, when you say it out loud, and then it was just like, oh, there really hasn't been. And there had, this wasn't like, I mean, this was just a few years ago before COVID messed up Comic-Con. So what, it almost 20 years, and it's like, there's been, you got, well, like Jim showed you, you got Éomer back there, but you got Aragorn on horse, you've got Legolas and Gimli on a horse, you got Gandalf on Shadowfax, you had, even though he technically falls in the horse and rider line for us, Sam and Bill and Pony, it's just, there's a lot of characters with horses, but there were no people, the horse people did not have a character with a horse. It was really wild. And then obviously you've got that very beautiful Éomer on horse. So a Theoden on Snowmane obviously is a piece, is obviously, and he does appear on horse in the Two Towers. But is that a piece that would make more sense for you guys as a creative, for you from a creative to put him in Two Towers, where you only see him on the horse really in action-y sequence at the Battle of Helm's Deep? or do you creatively think we should put him, and I'm not asking you to spill the beans, or put him on in the Return of the King, where you have more choices before obviously the Witch King messes everything up?
These are exactly the conversations that we have. So what you've just had is exactly the boardroom conversations that we have about this kind of stuff, and where we bat this backwards and forwards and argue about it. You know, like there's the fantastic charge down the causeway from Helm's Deep, right, where he rides down there, but he's not on Snowmane at that moment. And Snowmane is kind of the, you know, the character, that's the iconic horse of King Theoden, you know. So if we want to do him on Snowmane, well, that argues for Ride of the Rohirrim and Return of the King. So, you know, it's all that kind of stuff, right? So, yeah, look, that to me is one of those statues that is inevitable. It's going to happen at some point. Again, it's just a question of when we can squeeze it into the line, along with everything else that competes for it for space. And, you know, when we have these meetings where we pitch all these ideas, basically it's like the March Madness kind of thing, right? We have all these statues. We've got a limited number of slots in the line each year, and we've got all the stuff we want to do. And so we all have the things that we champion and try to argue to fight our way through.
We should team up next year.
Yeah, we should do
a March Madness deal with you guys,
right.
so we can have, you know, I've already settled for next year's theme. Tell Kristen and everybody we've got it settled. We're ready to go. Oh, another piece that, before, like I said, before we let you go, and we've already talked for 90 minutes. I know I don't want to hold you much longer.
It flies past, isn't it?
It does fly, and I'll say this: doing this is really, really fun. Getting to chat with people.
Again.
And absolutely, if you'll come back, we'll definitely be dragging you back.
And assuming I still have a job on Monday that I haven't given away too much, I'd love to come back.
It's not, you're safe right now because this isn't airing live. It's just recording on my computer. So go in on Monday and be like, I didn't say anything. Not everything's cool. I'm gonna edit it. Every time he starts to say something, it's just gonna be a noise, and people will be like, what's going on? I'm keeping people employed. That's what we do around here. The Helm's Deep environment from the original Sideshow Weta line. Obviously, what was originally shown, you know, in the photos for, you know, to sell it, the initial photos. Obviously, there was a lot of color. There was color to it and everything, and then when the production piece came out, obviously it turned out very gray. Is that a type of piece that you guys look at and see how you know, that people like me that have it, but that it didn't turn out like the initial photos with some coloring in it and stuff like that? Is that a piece that you guys have thought, obviously with the Two Towers coming up, would be a really great piece to go back and do, obviously as an environment? Because I mean, I love the environments. It's one of my favorite lines. Is that a type of piece that you guys look at and think we might want to redo because there were some hiccups with the original? And the second part to that is, obviously Helm's Deep, the original Helm's Deep environment is post the Uruk-hai blowing the wall up. And so do you guys think in that regard, like with the Argonath, like, hey, we have to make it a little bit different, like maybe the wall's not blown up? Is that something that you guys, or would you guys kind of do post battle still, even though people might go, well, they just copied the original? Is that something that you guys fight over as far as like ideas when it comes to something like Helm's Deep?
Totally. That's the, as you say, these are exactly the kind of conversations we have, you know. Is there a fresh way to do something? Is something iconic enough that it needs to be revisited? Is there, can it be done better at a larger scale or a smaller scale or whatever, you know, that kind of stuff. All these are all conversations we have when we're trying to select these pieces. So yeah, you've just basically, again, reenacted exactly the kind of stuff that we would go through on these kind of stuff, be it Helm's Deep or something else. But I would say in terms of like the most, Bag End was our kind of big iconic environment for last year for the Fellowship of the Ring. I guess, I mean, we also did the Argonath, and we also did the Gates of Moria, but we will likewise be looking for an iconic piece for this year for the Two Towers. So you know, when you go down through the list of environments in the Two Towers, in terms of big iconic environments, it's a pretty small list, and Helm's Deep is absolutely on that list.
Helm's Deep has got to be on the list. Yeah,
so those conversations have been had. What I won't tell you is what we selected, because that would spoil the surprise. But yes, Helm's Deep was on that list for all the reasons that you said. Yeah.
So Daniel, is there something that, is something that is not birthed and you just would love to do it, but it's never going to happen?
Right. Oh my goodness, what would that be? Well, you never say never, right?
I know, yeah.
Like a 1/6 scale Thranduil on Throne, even maybe 5 years ago, would have been a never going to happen piece. In fact, it was. I remember pitching that way back in the day, and them going, "Yeah, wouldn't that be fun? But we'll never do it." And then it ended up happening. A 1/6 scale Balrog was always a never going to happen kind of piece, But now I almost hesitate to say that because maybe there's a way. And no, I'm not dropping hints of anything to come, but I'm just.
There are people on the flame when they see this are gonna, because there's always, anytime a Balrog comes up, 1/6 Balrog. People are like, do you understand how big that thing would be?
That's as big as I am, basically.
I mean, you need it with its own room.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, people.
But maybe you don't do the whole thing. Maybe it's only like the front half of it's busting through some Moria architecture or something like that, or I don't know. There are ways around these things, and now that we're sort of doing more with lights, that could be a really spectacular piece. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know if there's anything that's completely off the table. I'd hesitate to say that anything is completely off the table. Just because I've been wrong so often.
I think that's probably fairly, pretty spot on, because I don't know that. You look at where the original Sideshow Weta line started and the things that were in it and the things that we're getting now. From if you just talk about what you guys as Weta have done, both as part of that line and this line, not any other companies. There's no way. I'll use Treebeard as an example. I would not have thought when I was buying stuff back from the Sideshow Weta line that there would eventually be a Treebeard statue, because he's so big and there's so many intricate little pieces on him.
If you like, I can talk you through the Treebeard process, because that's an interesting story too. So that was originally pitched as a roughly 1/10 scale figure. And so we imagined that we would do it, and that we would do a couple of miniature statues of Merry and Pippin, and they would be sitting around in I think the setting we imagined for them was somewhere in Fangorn Forest, maybe sipping their ent drafts or something like that, right? And then the thought was that if you bought the big Treebeard, you could take them off and stick them up in the branches. And then that sort of got mixed. Was like, no, we should just do Treebeard with the two hobbits stuck in there. And then as we were working on it, and we were trying to calculate exactly how big it was going to be, how expensive it was going to be. And then the thought was, well, if it's going to be that big and that expensive, why not just do it 1/6 scale and make it 50% more expensive, or whatever the calculation was. I can't remember what it was. And that's how kind of that came about. But yeah, that was pitched as like a sort of, a yay big kind of piece. And then it ended up becoming.
Yeah.
And that was all because, we were seeing the kind of statues that are being made in the world now. People are making stuff. Look, there's a 1-to-1 scale Sauron bust coming out now from another company.
Who's Queen Studios or somebody, whoever's making that? The thing is, it's bigger. The bust is bigger than me, and I'm 6 foot tall.
Yeah. So like when I say
I'm buying never, that's bigger than me. How am I supposed to get that into my house?
Yeah.
I mean,
imagine a 1/6 scale fell beast with its wings out. Something like an 8 or 9 foot wingspan would be incredible. But that's to answer your question, Jim. That's something I would say. Would be amazing. But probably never going to happen.
Right.
But we may, in 5 years' time, we may be having this conversation, and that's just been announced. Whether by us or somebody else. So who knows?
Well, and to your point, Josh said I couldn't fit it into my house. There is the production component and the expense and the accounting components of it. But then there is literally where would I put something like this? That for me was the Thranduil on Throne, because it was such a ginormous piece that I just couldn't figure out where I would put something like that. So that comes into play as well in the demand side of the equation. So.
Well, and not just that, but if you've been collecting a long time, like, Jim has been collecting a long time. I've been collecting a long time. Rumi has been collecting a long time. There's people like us that have been collecting 20 years or so, where you have to sell pieces off every once in a while because of the size of the pieces that are coming out. I mean, you know, the Sauron that you guys are going to be putting out is a big piece. I mean, he's a 6 scale statue, but he's still big. You know, that the Balrog that you guys first did when you relaunched the line, that's a big piece. So if you're lucky enough to have Azog on Warg, that thing's a huge piece. So yeah, I mean, these pieces are not small, and so you have to really judge what you're going to buy because of the sheer size of the pieces and stuff.
And it also, for us, in selecting the pieces that we make, means that we don't just always go bigger. You know, so this, you know, as I think I mentioned, the Masters Collection piece this year is not enormous. It's a smaller piece. So, you know, because we are aware that space is an issue for folks, it's telling that even in Weta Workshop, which is a 65,000 square foot building, there's no single room with all the collectibles in them. We can't fit them in any one room anymore now. So they're in multiple places all over the place.
Kind of like my house.
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My solution is it just takes over. You know, find places to put things. So yeah.
Yeah.
I would do that, but my nephews are 3 and 1, so I don't. They're a little too young to be getting near Uncle Josh's pretties just yet.
So they will have to be high up or behind glass, right?
Oh yeah, they're in my basement in my little collection room. That, you know, I've already told them, they obviously are too young to understand, but I've already told them, you know, I'm not married with any kids, so more than likely you guys are getting these. Hope you like Lord of the Rings.
But we do think about this stuff. So when we're designing these items, these collectibles, we definitely think of, is this a shelf piece? Is this a wall piece? Is this a next to my computer at my work piece? Or is this a centerpiece? You know, is this a coffee table, you know? And, you know, most people are only going to be able to have 1 or 2 coffee table pieces, and the rest have to be smaller pieces. So we definitely think about that kind of thing. What do you got there, Jim?
Oh, it's one of the
yeah.
These are right next to the computer, and they're kind of surrounding my coaster so that I can put my drink.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Hey, well, this has been super fun, guys. Was there anything else you wanted to cover before we postpone? We push the rest till next time?
I think.
Great.
No, we kind of touched upon everything. There were a couple of questions I skipped that we'll save for next time, but we're coming up on actually 2 hours. We were 3 minutes and 45 seconds short of 2 hours. So I know we've stolen enough of your what is it, Saturday afternoon for you. You know, as you know, as I've said, we thank you. I thank you for coming on and doing this. Obviously, you know, I know you enjoy talking about the collectibles and everything, and
I love talking with you guys too. So I appreciate the thanks, but I'm going to throw them right back at you and say that, you know, the only reason we can have these conversations is because you guys are so passionate about this stuff. You know, otherwise we would have had to have stopped making it years ago. So it really is it's an enabling relationship, right? You know.
Definitely.
And
definitely
we enjoy it. Hope it's still fun for you guys. It's definitely fun for us, and I really look forward to the time that we can actually sit around and talk about the stuff in person, either at Dragon Con or at San Diego Comic Con or somewhere else.
I would love to figure out how to get Weta to Dragon Con.
I would love to come, man. I almost made it there twice, and it just fell through each time for different reasons. But I would love to get there. And I've heard it's quite a show.
It is. It is.
If they have Comic Con this year in person, which I mean, since they had the one in November, are you going to be able to, are you on the list of crew to make it to San Diego?
I personally am not. I don't know, but I also don't know. I'm not aware of what our plans are for San Diego this year, so I'm hesitant to say anything because I could be completely wrong. I haven't had those conversations, but if I was on the list to go, I would know about it right now. So I'm saying no for me, but I hope I can get there next year. That would be great.
Well, as long as I can figure out a way to keep going, I'm going to keep going until we at least get to run into each other one more time. Because, you know, like I said, for me personally, I'm very thankful and blessed to be able to be friends with people like yourself who share the passion for something like Middle Earth and collecting. And, you know, really, for people watching, I will say this: Weta Workshop, in all the years that I've been going to Comic Con and talking to all of you, have never once made this just normal school teacher from Missouri feel like anything less than the most important you're talking to in that moment. And the fact that you guys care about our opinions and want to know what we're thinking, what we might want to see, really, it means a lot for collectors, because it's not every company does that. And so they just put stuff out because they know it's going to sell, but they don't really listen to, hey, we might want to see a Denethor statue. And the fact that you guys take that into advisement and really want to try and do that because there are people that want it, that means a lot. And so we're thankful for folks like you and all the other so many great people that work at Weta Workshop for caring about us as collectors.
Most definitely. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Well, it's nice meeting you, Jim, finally. And let's look forward to us doing this again in future. Hopefully not too long.
Yeah. Well, I know you were pretty busy after.
Should we try and do it like every 6 months or something? Something like that could be fun. Catch up regularly. And if not, maybe another team.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially if we got some announcements, you can talk about some more stuff. That'd be fantastic.
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah, we could let's try to do something as people are actually watching this recording. So let's schedule this. Let's try to do something in the fall.
Sounds good.
We'll have Comic-Con, have come up, and we'll be able to talk about some of those pieces. And we did a Comic-Con episode last year. And we had me and Jim and Ben. We had a lot of fun talking about it. But we could do a couple episodes with Comic-Con and have you on and in the fall and talk about some of those pieces. And you'll be able to kind of go into the process of those and not maybe. We won't risk getting you into hot water when you go into work on Monday.
Yeah, I know. There'll be all these questions about the Return of the King Masters collection piece. I know, you guys. So,
I don't I make no promises that we won't have some questions that you might have to
to dodge. I'm always
go around and stuff.
Awesome. Hey, well, lovely to talk to you guys. Be well. Say hi to all our mutual friends for me, and we'll talk.
We'll do. All right. Let me do something real quick.